good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the ROS Media channel. My name's Andy. If you're here for the first time, I'm in charge of the media channel here at the Republic of Old Souls. And we've also got my good friend Ian Clifford, who is the founder and president of our Republic of Old Souls Nation. If you are curious to know what we do, then there's plenty of content that you can dig your teeth into. But today what we're covering is all of your questions from our Saturday 13th of June webinar. So if you're new to this, we run a flagship webinar every single week on a Saturday morning, 10 a.m. And then what we do is we collate everybody's questions together and we answer those early part of the following week, which is what we're doing now. So if you're watching this as a recording, we're actually recording this on Tuesday 16th. So we're going to go through all your questions from last Saturday, make sure that we cover all of those so you've got some clarity. And hopefully that will give you enough information to be able to make a decision about whether you want to move forwards with our protocols. If you're not sure what the protocols are, I'm sure you will be very, very soon, because as I've said, we've got a ton of content that Ian and I have done on each of the individual protocols on the ROS Media channel. And we'd love for you to dig into those. We'll give you some links at the end of today's session for you to be able to do that. And then also all of Ian's technical reports are on the Ecclesia Law website as well. So if you're into the technical breakdown of what this is, how it works, excuse me, and why it works, everything is broken down. There's about 70 different technical papers that Ian has written. If you're unsure who Ian is, then Ian, maybe you could just give people a very, very brief intro into who you are, your background, and then we can dig into the questions.
Yeah, well, Ian Clifford, I set this up because basically I want freedom for the membership. We can't do it individually. We have to do it as a group. The Freedom Plan is what is my big vision, which is an independent ecosystem with our own free energy, our water from the atmosphere, our fresh food, our non-pharma health systems, our communication without track and trace, and our own currency. And in order to build that nation ultimately with its own identity and its own passports, we hope going forward, is to offer people basically a way to play the game of Monopoly at the advanced level, which is what we tend to talk about a lot. And the key to that is to redirect taxes, which most people don't know that they're entitled to a redirection of taxes on their human energy, which is what's driving the monetary system. The banking system only operates off the back of human energy, and that's what we mostly specialize in. We do some other things as well, like voiding mortgages and helping people shelter their assets in trust and avoid the digital ID and all these kind of things. But the flagship is redirection of taxes, which I think where a lot of the questions on today's Q&A, I'm sure, are going to be connected to that.
They are indeed.
Very high level. I used to be a so-called professional. I no longer practice. I was a wealth manager, fund manager, studied, got all sorts of qualifications back in the 90s, chartered insurance, all that kind of thing. Graduated with honours, won some awards, built big financial services companies. All of that's in the long and distant past. Been on a very interesting journey in the last 15, 16 years with a lot of propaganda about me, which is because I'm a whistleblower. So if you are interested in knowing more about my backstory, go to Ian Clifford whistleblower.is and the whole story's there. But it's a journey, and it's what, all that backstory is why we're here today, because if it hadn't happened, all the different things that unfolded, we wouldn't be talking about redirecting taxes. I'd be doing something very different, I'm sure. So
yeah, you'd probably still be in the financial markets doing what you were doing, wouldn't you? And none of this would have even come to light. So I'm a big believer that we're exactly where we need to be at that point in time. And if you're aligned with that, then we're grateful to have you with us. So let's dig into the questions. You mentioned a moment ago, Ian, question about tax redirection on your human energy. And interestingly, that is part and parcel of the first category. Bank hypothecation, human energy, and the commercial mechanics of this. So we've got 3 questions here. The first one is, and this is an interesting one. I'm not quite sure. I'm not entirely sure what they are asking here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. This particular person who attended the webinar said, I'd love to understand the broader context of what lies behind the fact that the banksters, as they call them, respect human energy.
Well, I'm not sure that they respect it, but they can't operate without it. So it is accounting ledgers, money of account. There has to be a deposit. There has to be a negotiable instrument deposited into the banking system for the banks to create a matching liability on the other side of their balance sheet. Now, you can't deposit a negotiable instrument unless that is backed by energy, because it's got to be backed by something. An artificial construct, which is the birth certificate construct, can't on its own make a deposit, because it can't. It's not alive. It's dead. It can't do anything without its agent. Its agent is the living soul. That is where the energy affect the living soul, or even the birth certificate construct. But without those two, in the combination that is how it's been set up, the banks can't operate. So I don't think it's respect. I think it is total and utter reliance, but not respect.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, next question then, Ian, is I'm just curious if it would help people understand the how of their signature being monetized. If you could explain the technical process, which apparently is explained in Federal Reserve Operating Circular 10. Now, that's something I've not heard of before. Don't know whether you have, Ian.
Yeah, I may well have read it along the way, but it doesn't come to mind. Ultimately, it's about ex nihilo credit, and this is where the banks will say, "Oh yeah, we lend out customer deposits. That's what we do," and that sounds very, very logical. They take in deposits, they store them up, and then they lend them out at interest, and they deserve to charge interest because they're taking a risk, and the interest is meant to be the risk premium for the fact that the bank has to pay the savers back, irrespective of whether the borrowers pay them back. But of course, it doesn't work like that at all. It is a deposit of a negotiable instrument. It's the deposit of a promise, where a promise is backed by human energy. So the banks say, come to us, open an account. The account is in the name of the birth certificate construct. If you want to get a loan or a credit card or a mortgage, then you need to sign up for a contract. The contract enables the bank to create the credit ex nihilo, because the signature of the customer is the trigger point of the deposit of the negotiable instrument. And that negotiable instrument effectively is a transference of energy because it comes with obligation, because the obligation of the living soul is to pay the bank interest. Because the future labour is backing the promise. I promise to pay $1 million in the future. If that was the mortgage value, that promise only has real value attached to it because there's a commitment to pay interest on the $1 million mortgage. So the banks take the deposit in. There's your $1 million deposit of negotiable instrument. Because they've got an accounting exemption, they can match it on the other side of their balance sheet with a matching liability. This promise goes away, the liability stays, which is the debt, and that's how ex nihilo credit works. But without the deposit of the promise, the energy, then the banks couldn't match it with a matching liability, which is where the whole debt-based system springs from. Everything on the monopoly board is debt-based. It's all negative. You can't have a positive debt. Debt's always negative. And then, of course, these debts which the banks have created as a result of the matching liability, asset and liability on the balance sheet, they can sell those into pools, into tranches. They have an interest rate flow, a cash flow of the interest rate. So they're worth a lot in the future to the banks. The banks sell them off to the clearing banks, sell them to the investment banks. The investment banks trade them, hypothecate them, which is using them for leverage as collateral for additional lines of credit which they can generate. And they basically can't do any of these things unless there is that initial deposit of the human energy at the very beginning of the transaction. And I'd have to look at that Federal Reserve publication, but it won't be saying anything different from, if you read the Preacher from Jekyll Island, it talks about ex nihilo credit there. If you read Professor Richard Werner's work, if you read the Bank of England, Money in the Modern Economy, if you read Modern Money Mechanics, they're all basically telling you the same thing, which is the banks take deposits of human energy and convert them by matching them by providing the money supply through debt. Without debt, there can be no money supply. Because there is no money of substance, it's just accounting ledgers. So.
Okay. So, final question in this section, Ian, is do insurance companies use the hypothecation of premiums in the same way by creating debt securities on the securities market or even via loan companies within their group structures?
Well, insurance companies, and I know a lot about this because that's where I started off. Insurance companies don't have a banking license.
No.
There's a couple of exceptions where AIG bought a bank. AIG is an insurance company in the US. They bought a bank, but they don't actually have an ex nihilo credit creation license. What they do is they pool the promises to pay. So they operate a little bit like seed in company, where they take the promises to pay in pools, in tranches, and they then basically what they're doing is they're managing accounting ledgers of debt, which is the pool of insurance premiums, and they pay out hopefully less than they take in on premium, because if they pay out more than they take in, then they're going to go bust. So insurance companies are very, very good mathematicians. The whole of their model is based on risk and probability of risk. They're very, very good at it. I got deeply involved in it in my early career, working with actuaries, and they're very, very good at what they're very good at is mortality. So they know if they've got like a lot of customers who've all got life insurance with them, they can calculate how much they're going to pay out with this portfolio of lives, what the premium income's going to be, and they always make a profit. And they also hedge it as well through reinsurance. So it's a very different model. Unless the insurance company owns a bank, then they can't do ex nihilo credit. The premiums are based on accounting ledgers. It's very different from a banking model. Having said that, the insurance companies in many ways have a much bigger balance sheet than the banks. They are amongst the richest organizations in the world, the insurance companies, especially the US insurance companies, the big insurers in the US, and the reinsurance companies, which most people don't really realize that they're going on, what they're doing, because they don't actually deal with them. They sit behind the scenes and they actually underwrite the risks of the insurance companies. So the reinsurance companies, Munich Re and other Re's, are all Re's. They're the real big giants in the insurance world.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's move on to category number 2, or section number 2, which is to do with the 1099 OIDs. My goodness me, we've spoken about that many times. Trust architecture as well. So the foreign grantor trust, the 98 series trust, and then mortgage discharge as well, which interestingly, we are going to be talking about that in our webinar preview for this Saturday. So let's go into the first question here. If I correctly understand, I think this is someone not necessarily asking a question, just wanting clarity that they're right in their thinking, Ian. So they've put, if I correctly understand, when the 1099 form OID is filed to the IRS, and the IRS approves my foreign grantor 98 as the holder in due course of my mortgage and corrected the ledger, the mortgage is discharged. The bank nominee and the local bank who provided the mortgage must discharge the mortgage in the public system. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's because the investment bank, the indentured trustee, is holding the note as if it were theirs. That's the mortgage note. And if you look at the Bills of Exchange Act, and basically they are holding it, but whilst presuming to be the creditor, but they're not. They don't file 1099 OID, because if they did, then they would no longer be able to presume creditor status. So when the Foreign Grantors Trust files 1099 OID, what it actually does is it shifts the note from the indentured trustee to the Foreign Grantors Trust. So now the Foreign Grantors Trust is holding the note, which is why it's holder in due course, because it actually now holds the obligation, because you've got a payer and a payer and a payor on a note, on a promise to pay in the future. So now the Foreign Grantors Trust is entitled to the proceeds of the note, which is, in the case of the signature credit tax redirection, it's the taxes which the investment bank has paid, is paying for the use of the note. Yep. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And you see, because it's accounting ledgers, there isn't actually any money that's changing hands. It's just it's a correction of the ledger. Who is holding the note? Because the holder of the note could be seen as the creditor. Well, if the Foreign Grantors Trust is holding the note, then and that is for the benefit of the beneficiary being the living soul of the Foreign Grantors Trust, then the mortgage is effectively the ledger, because all it is an accounting ledger, is being discharged, zeroed out. But there's no money changing hands as such. It's an accounting correction. That's what's going on.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, you cannot pay for anything. So let's move on to the next question. Does the IRS have to approve the Foreign Grantor Trust before any taxes can be redirected?
Well, they issue an EIN number when you first apply for the EIN. There's what's called an SS4 application that goes with details about the trust indenture. And yeah, if you like, the IRS does approve it, because they won't issue, and this is their Cincinnati office, they won't issue an EIN number unless they're happy with the structure of the Foreign Grantors Trust. So in many ways, they do approve it.
Yeah. Okay. So next question, Ian. In order for the 98, there's a lot about 98 grantor trusts here. In order for the 98 series to be tax exempt and protected under 508C1A, does it work in tandem with a separate US ecclesiastical trust, or is it just the 98 series trust? And then there's a second part to this question. By foreign grantor trust, does that mean foreign from the US corporation, but can still be in the States? So two parts to that.
Yeah, a little bit of confusion there. I mean, the foreign grantors trust, the grantor should be foreign alien to the United States. So it's a foreign grantor trust where the grantor is not disclosing that they are a social insurance or SSN number holder, can form a grantor's trust, a foreign grantor's trust. The living soul is the beneficiary of it, and an appointed trustee under an attorney-in-fact model can operate that foreign grantor's trust without it being considered a US trust, US domestic trust. And that's how it works. But in terms of the private treasury side of it, which is where you will spend and receive back the recoupments, the tax redirections going forward, that needs to be set up so that the grantor is non-US. So it would be better in that case to set up if the grantor was US and they wanted a bank account for their private treasury, would be to set up a 508c1a ministry, which is non-reporting.
Yeah.
Because the anomaly and the problem is that if the US resident sets up a foreign grantor's trust, they are supposed to report it. It's, many don't, and it will probably never be discovered, but it's much better if they're going to use it as a private treasury as opposed to the 1099 OID filing trust, to use the 508c1a as a private treasury, because then you can be a US resident, you can put down your SSN number as the grantor of the 508c1a ministry, but there's no reporting requirements, whereas a foreign grantor's trust with a US resident as the grantor is supposed to report what the trust is doing. So it's horses for courses, really. But you can't, in theory, you could have both. You could have, I suppose you would have both if you had the 98 series grantor trust for filing 1099 OID, and then you had the 508c1a ministry as a private treasury. If you're a US resident, that would work very, very well.
Okay, so for clarity, for whoever asked this question, they're two separate entities. The 98 series grantor trust is not protected under 508c1a. That is a completely different trust structure.
Yes.
So last question in this section here. How do we use the 1099 OID? Again, a lot of confusion here, Ian. How do we use the 1099 OID to make purchases like tractors or land? I'm assuming this might be from a farmer or a farming family, potentially.
Yeah, I think this is, a few years ago, there was a guy called Chris Hauser who was all over the YouTube, had about 1 million followers, talking about using a 1099A as a method of, like a check. Go into your car dealer, hand over a 1099A and say, there you go, cash that in with the treasury. And by the way, can you polish the car before I leave? That sort of thing. And it didn't work. So allegedly a 1099A was a check, or like a check, and it didn't work. And many people tried it. Many people realized very quickly it wasn't going to work. And I think that's what this question's about. A 1099 OID is basically, it's a tax return. It is a return that redirects the taxes. It's not a check. It's definitely not a money order or a check.
No.
So they're very different things. 1099A is actually what you do when you report abandoned property. It's got a very different use to the 1099 OID. So an OID is about redirecting withholding taxes, which is what is going on. That's what the grantor trust is doing. It's redirecting withholding taxes that have been paid on the human energy, whereas 1099A is talking about abandonment of property. So they are very different. 1099A, 1099C. 1099C is a cancellation of debt. but that's not really used for the consumer. That's used by the provider of the finance can send in a 1099-C to cancel the debt which they may have had on their books. So these things were flowing around on the internet a few years ago. I think they've been going around for a long time. But there was a sort of crescendo of people that were all following Chris Hauser and a number of other people on the bandwagon thinking they could buy houses and cars with a 1099-A, tractors, you know, any kind of machinery or something like this. But no, unfortunately, you can't go into the dealership with a 1099-A and walk out with a tractor.
No. But what you can do is you can file 1099 OID through your foreign grantor trust. You can then recoup your taxes that have been paid, and then you can buy yourself a tractor or buy yourself some land through your private asset fortress, your treasury, and then recoup that back in taxes the following year as if you never paid for it. So you can use the 1099 OID, just maybe not in the way that people are thinking. Been watching too many of these old YouTube videos by the sounds of things. All right, let's move on to section 3 then, Ian, where we're now talking about commercial status, legal instruments. And the first question is, what do I need to do in order to shift from debtor agent status to creditor and general executor status?
Well, that's a good question, because the agent, being the living soul, is the agent for the birth certificate construct. Now, all the time that you are holding out, so the living soul holds itself out as if it were the birth certificate construct, then that creates this executor de son tort problem, where the living soul is basically operating a decedent estate as its executor, but it's as the executor of all the wrongs. And that's where we've all done it. We've all got a driving license, passport, bank card, maybe voted, things of this type, maybe paid taxes as if we were the birth certificate construct. So you've got to make a declaration that you are the agent for the birth certificate construct, but you are making a declaration that you're not it. You use clausula rebus sextantibus. It's a declaration that says, even though you may have made mistakes in the past, you've cleaned up the record now. You now realise that you're not the birth certificate construct. You can still represent it as its agent, but you're doing it now as occupying the office of general executor, rather than occupying the office of the executor de son tort. So you're lawfully operating the decedent estate as the occupant of the office of general executor, which gives you every right to use the birth certificate construct. That cleans it up. If you then set up a foreign grantors trust, and the foreign grantors trust files 1099 OID, you as the agent for the grantor have cleaned up the whole A through Z of that. So there can be no risk of the foreign grantors trust being contaminated by an executor de son tort as the grantor, because they no longer the executor de son tort. They are the occupant of the office of the general executor, which is the clean and tidy and correct way of operating on the Monopoly Board.
Got it. And if you want to know which protocol to use for that, guys, it is the Envoy protocol. That is the one that you would need. So moving on to the next question. If we are the agent for the banker, the straw man, then why can't we just pay all our straw man's debts by issuing negotiable instruments, e.g. promissory notes? Do you know anyone who has had success with this? I think we know the answer to that one.
Sadly, no, because you see, the recipient of a negotiable instrument needs to be a bank.
Yeah.
And you go and give a negotiable instrument to your electric company or your gas company, or go to your mortgage company and say, hey, that mortgage I've got, here's a promissory note, I'm discharging it. The mortgage company won't take the note because they don't have to. But the utilities companies won't take it. They're not banks. The banks can can choose whether to take promissory notes or not. They're not going to take them for discharge of debt at that, in that context. They'll take a promise to pay and create a note, but they won't take a note to discharge. Many people have tried. Some people claim it works. I've never seen it work. Technically, it doesn't work. It may look as if it's working if you tender a promissory note and the gas company doesn't keep sending you a bill. You might think, oh, it's worked, but it's actually just because they can't be bothered to argue anymore and they write the debt off. So it doesn't work. Acceptance for value, that's another way of using an endorsement on a bill. So you get a gas bill, you write on it acceptance for value. That may look like it's worked every now and again, but it doesn't actually work technically, because it's like endorsing a check, but it isn't really a check. So a lot of people get seduced into believing that they can accept debt for value and discharge it where you can't. But every now and again, it appears to work, and people think, oh yeah, this is working. I'll try it on something else, and then suddenly realise it doesn't work on the other thing that they tried, but it never actually worked on the first thing either. So it just looked like it did. So there's only one way to play this game, and that is to redirect the taxes. The banking cartel have got their monopoly sewed up. That's why they're a cartel. They're the only ones that can create ex nihilo credit. They're the only ones that can discharge existing debt outside of the United States Treasury, which is the bankruptcy trustee. You can endorse taxes and send the tax bill back to the Treasury. If your tax bill's from the US, within the US, they can discharge a tax bill because all obligations are obligations of the United States. But you can't do that in Canada or Australia or United Kingdom because it doesn't work like that there. So again, the best way to discharge is to redirect taxes that you've already, that you're already entitled to, your bank payments, mortgages, loans, credit cards, generating all this tax revenue. You redirect it, and then you can discharge it with new promises to pay, which the banks will accept because that's what they do anyway. And then you can redirect the taxes on those, and that is by far the smartest way of doing it.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is to do with, again, the Office of the Executor. Does the Office of the Executor change when we do a deed poll and change our name to given names and removing the surname? I ask because Ian previously mentioned doing his own name change using a deed poll. Are there pitfalls or problems arising from a deed poll, or only benefits?
Well, the deed poll is just the name of the decedent estate. It's not going to change any status. It's still a decedent estate. I changed from Ian Clifford Stamp to Ian Clifford because Ian Clifford is actually the proper name on the birth certificate. Ian Clifford is the proper name, is the name of the living soul, and Stamp is the name of the the state's entity. But I changed on deed poll because I just didn't want to be known as Stamp, because I know absolutely for sure that that is the name that belongs to the birth certificate construct from day one. So it doesn't actually make a difference to the executor role. I did it because I just didn't want to be known as Stamp anymore, because I wanted to draw a line in the sand and say, no, I'm Ian Clifford. But actually there's two titles. You see, there's Ian Clifford, the living soul, and then there's Ian Clifford, the birth certificate construct, because and if you get married or if you change your name, the original birth certificate construct still stays there. It's just like, if you form a company, think of it like this. You form a company and it's called ABC Limited. And then 10 years later, you decide, no, I'm going to call it DEF Limited. It's still got the same reference number. It's still got the same corporate footprint. It's changed its name, but it's still a corporation. It's still registered. It's still operating as a decedent estate. It doesn't change.
And still traceable to back when it started, where you'll see the original name there anyway. So, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to the next category, Ian, which is to do with international tracking and currency valuations as well. So let's talk a little bit about this. How does someone from a country that is not US track back? I have been understanding that this is only through the IRS.
Well, there's a popular belief that unless you're somehow, operating with a bank that's US related, that you can't do signature, credit, tax redirection. It'll be, it's no shock to me because I've done the research, but nearly every bank in the world has got a relationship with a US bank somewhere, a correspondent bank, because they want to access the Federal Reserve window. So the US correspondent bank will be doing that. This is how the United States Treasury can sanction banks in China, can sanction banks in Iran, because they all want to access the Federal Reserve window, either directly or indirectly. So even though it may look as if the banks are separate and they're operating in their own country, behind the scenes, they're all interrelated, and they're basically all operating and wanting access either directly or indirectly to the Federal Reserve window. And that is what's going on here. So there are only a couple of exceptions in the world where there is no linkage. I think North Korea is one, and probably Samoa.
Okay.
Possibly not Samoa. Sorry, let's get the name right. They've adopted Bitcoin, completely adopted Bitcoin. The name of it is El Salvador. El Salvador, not Samoa. El Salvador.
Okay.
They probably don't have a linkage, although the banks that operate there may still have. Where I am here, North Cyprus, but they have a correspondent. All the banks here have correspondent banks in Turkey. Turkey is definitely part of the IMF system.
Yeah.
If you've got to look at it from the IMF, it's like a banking pyramid. The IMF is at the top, and all the banks fit in that pyramid somewhere.
Okay. So next question, when calculating USD value of signature credit from other currencies, what exchange rate do we use? Do we use present exchange rate or historical exchange rate at the time of the bank transactions? Well, I don't think you want to do that.
Well, the United States Treasury publish a dollar exchange rate every year, actually.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way back. So if you've created, your bank payments, your mortgages were in Canadian dollars or Australian dollars or Swiss francs or something like this, then you'd have to take the current value of the Swiss franc, Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, etc., and that would be converted to the current value of the United States dollar. Yeah. You wouldn't want to go back and try and do currency conversions in each year.
No,
I don't think you need to go down that pathway at all.
Okay. So just current year's exchange.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to section 5. This is our final section, Ian. Corporate accounts, joint accounts, and scaling limits. So first question is, if you have a limited company or an LLC paying taxes, can you recover them as well? Or is this only for individuals?
Well, the corporate account is no different from a personal account. In fact, they are both arguably a corporate account, both corporate accounts, because they are artificial constructs and they are corporate by nature. They are registered within the Monopoly Board system. So when you're signing as the signer on an LLC or some other kind of corporation, the signature still creates ex nihilo credit. So it doesn't really matter. Can you recoup the taxes? Well, If the taxes are being paid as a bank payment, then yeah, because that's issuing new promises to pay. Doesn't matter what you pay with them or what you appear to pay with them. It's an outflow of energy. It's the creation of ex nihilo credit. So yeah, you can redirect taxes on tax payments, which is ironic, isn't it? So.
Okay. So next question, how does it work for joint accounts? Can someone borrow, or can one borrower, reclaim the full amount?
Yeah, because the joint accounts, whether they're mortgages or some other kind of joint loan, they are jointly and severally liable. It's like a partnership. So one partner is responsible for the other and vice versa. So you can't both recoup signature credit taxes on the same loan because it can only be one or the other doing it, really. But yeah, it doesn't matter if it's joint and several liability. What's yours is, let's get this around the right way. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. That's how partnerships work.
Okay. Well, next question in this section is, if some bank accounts, here we go, are in two names due to working with, slightly different, this one. Okay, so not necessarily a joint account as in, partners, husband, wife, that kind of thing. If some bank accounts are in two names due to working with another guy when working together as builders, so this is very specific, no partnership agreement ever formed, can this be considered a non-business account, i.e. personal account for signature credit purposes?
It's an interesting one. I mean, it sounds like it's a sole trader account, but in the name of two different people, which is quite weird. I've not come across that before. I actually think it's probably an account in one of the two names, but they've just given it a different name. It's a sole trader account. That's what it sounds like to me, with a two names on the account itself. Either that, or they've opened up a partnership account at the bank. Difficult to know without knowing more detail, but can it be used for signature credit? Yeah, I mean, one or the other can use it for signature credit. Absolutely. If it's a sole trader account, then it should really be the sole trader, the sole proprietorship. So if it's a partnership, then either one could use it, but you can't both use it at the same time simultaneously.
No. Okay. And then the final question, Ian, for today is, what if a person has, say, 8 or 10 million to recoup? If you can claim back 2 million a year, do you set up more trust accounts?
Well, it's a good question. And, if it was as easy as that, then you could set up 50 trust accounts and do 2 million a year each and do 100 million in the same year. But the IRS doesn't like that. It's per grantor, not per trust. So $2 million per grantor. So if you've got a, husband, wife, or some trusted partner and you want to do it together, then you could do 4 million per, so it's 2 million per grantor. And if you've got 8 million, then it's going to take you the next 4 years to recoup that. And then you've got the 8 million in the system, and then you've got every year going forward, you can spend and recoup at your 2 million a year limit. So yeah, you absorb the 8 million going forward, not backwards, and forward.
Yeah, understood. And we've explained, haven't we, why there is that 2 million cap. It's to do with manual reviews and slowing everything down in that regard, which we really do not want when it comes to trying to help members push this through. So that brings us to the end of the questions today, Ian. So we've had around 16 that we've answered there. We did have a question in the comments as well on socials, which was to do with cost of services. Well, quite frankly, there is no cost. And the reason that we say that is because this is on a donation basis. And once you've made your donation and we put you through the processes, when you've recouped, part of what you recoup will be that same said donation that you made. which means that you can recoup that in the following tax year as well. So ultimately, there is no cost. But if you want to know what the donation structure looks like, the best thing that you can do is reach out in your members area and book a call with a consultant. And then they can give you a full breakdown based on your situation, how much signature credit tax redirection you have that you can recoup. And they'll be able to give you a sliding scale there. There's plenty of different options for people when it comes to getting started with this. We have lower barriers to entry for people who are really struggling, who maybe want to pay a higher back-end donation to the Republic of Old Souls Nation for the Freedom Plan, which in itself, even though you may be paying a higher back-end donation, that is also recoupable in the following year. So really doesn't make any difference. It's just, well, how much do I cash flow now? Do I get in at a lower barrier to entry because I'm really struggling right now and I'll recoup that back-end fee later? Or do I pay a slightly larger donation at the front end and a smaller back-end donation? There's lots of different ways you can do this, guys, but really and truly, it's not a price list where you just sit down and open a menu and pick off the menu. What you really want to be doing is speaking to one of the consultants, tell them what your situation is, figure out and work out what your signature credit recoupment looks like. And we actually have a calculator that you can do that on. So you can punch in all your numbers and it will work it all out for you. When you've got all those details together, you can then sit down with a consultant and they'll map out how that's going to work for you personally. That's what I would recommend that you do. But before we leave everybody, Ian, there's some other recommendations that I would like to make, because you and I have got a webinar coming up on Saturday, haven't we? And this coming Saturday, we're going to be talking about mortgage discharge as well. I think mortgages are probably historically one of the biggest monthly outgoings for most families. And a lot of people are struggling right now. So if you want to learn a bit more about how you can actually discharge your current mortgage, your live mortgage that you have right now, and understand how to do that, Ian's going to be delivering all of that, the technical breakdown, how it works, why it works, how you get involved with that this coming Saturday. If you want to register for that, then you need to go here, roswebinars.is. You can register directly from that website. You can also register from your members platform as well. So there's a webinar section there where you can register for this coming Saturday. It's 10 a.m. UK time. We're going to be there live. We'd love to have you with us. The only thing I will say, and I say this every time, is we get way more people registering than we can actually have on the webinar. We can only take 1,000 seats on the webinar platform that we have. So if you really want to learn about discharging your mortgage and how to do that, then I would recommend that as soon as you finish watching this, you go and register for Saturday. If you've got questions surrounding the discharging of mortgages, then you've got two options there. You can either post a question when you register. So there'll be a box on the registration page where you can post a question. If you're not sure what your questions are until you start to get into the content, and based on what Ian's gonna reveal to you on Saturday, it brings questions to mind, then there is a Q&A chat on the webinar itself. You can post your questions in there, and we'll be back again this time next week answering those questions for you as well. So that's all I've got to say, Ian. Any final thoughts before we let everybody go?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, then explore the ROS Media channel more. Lots of good content on here. Go to Ecclesia Law Institute, where I write my research papers. If you are interested in past webinars, there's the webinar, I think it's called roswebinars.is. I think that's where you can get the past webinars. If you want to get involved in more interactive sort of Q&A, then we're just about to relaunch our avatar. Which was briefly launched and then censored, taken offline by the platform host. We've re-engineered it and we're just about to relaunch it. So if you want to access that, it's free of charge. If you want to use it as an advocate or earn points, you can earn $100 to set off against the donation of the enrollment donation by sending the avatar to people that you know, or putting it up on social media and getting people to click on it and use it. Then yeah, I would encourage you to look out for that, which will be hopefully this Saturday. We'll be announcing the reintroduction of the avatar.
That would be nice. That would be nice. We're working very heavily on that right now. It's interesting that it got censored, though, isn't it? So that should make it even more enticing for people to want to know, well, why? Why has this been censored? What information is Ian actually delivering here that the powers that be don't want you to know, especially the banks? And that would include the ability to discharge a mortgage. So we'd love to see you on Saturday, 10 a.m. UK time. We will be there, and hopefully you'll be joining us as well. Remember, only 1,000 seats, so get yourself registered as quick as you can. If you know other people within your family, your friends, your circle who would benefit from this information as well, and I can't think who wouldn't if they've got a mortgage or had past mortgages, that they want to learn how to recoup the taxes on those past mortgages, then we'd love to see them here on Saturday with you too. So that's all we've got for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we've given you some clarity on your questions. We'll be back again same time next week after the mortgage discharge webinar this Saturday. But for now, have a great day, and we will see you all soon. Bye for now.
Bye for now.